Joey's here.
My friends.
Yay! You're so cute, and every time I see you, you have cute things.
Yes, to be honest, yes, I have everything is cute.
Like in that way, you're like a kid. It's the best. Rithia, Joey met Aaliyah, and Aaliyah loved Joey. Yeah, she was like, Joni going to come over again? Joni going to come over soon?
So cute.
So cute.
Parenting's hard, you don't know what to do. You're blaming your kids, but it's probably you. You love your kids and that you can trust. Just remember your kids don't suck.
Welcome to Your Kids Don't Suck, cultivating closeness with your children through non-coercive conscious parenting. We're your hosts, Kara Tedstone and Rithia Lee. Let's dive in and grow together. Welcome back, everybody, to Your Kids Don't Suck. And today it's Rithia and I, and we have a special guest, and their name is Joey. Joey is our helper. Do you have like a name for yourself that what do you call yourself, Joey?
I think that for the simplicity of what I do mostly, I think it's definitely like our social media and our communications, like our digital communications, but for the podcast. But I have so many other ideas about Your Kids Don't Suck, so I think I'm a helper, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and also Joey works to help both of us individually with our work. So you're kind of like, that's how I see you, is just like, I don't know, but also a friend, just like somebody I could like message about whatever and be like, what are your thoughts? You've been working with us for Your Kids Don't Suck for a while. And the reason that you're here today is because, well, we have a lot of things to talk to you about in the relationship that you have with our work specifically, like the Your Kids Don't Suck work. But you are just the cutest and most like darling person in the world. And you are so fun, and you also really seem to like value and understand the work that we do. Why we wanted to kind of like get into that here today. And you're also not a parent, interestingly.
I met Kara through the internet, and Kara said, we have to do this podcast. And I was like, okay, fine. But then we became best friends. And then Kara found you, and it has like that same magical energy as meeting Kara. It's like I could not ask for a more joyful, enthusiastic, loving, conscientious, aware person to help with what we're
Yeah.
like doing. Social media technical work could be so grueling and kind of tedious and dry, and you just keep it alive. You really make it real, and you make it matter, and you're here because it's affecting your life. The philosophy is affecting your life, so tell us.
Oh my gosh, I just appreciate both of you so much. Yeah, I will say that like social media really is about connecting with people. And I think that's like one of the reasons why I do it pretty well is because I just have a natural knack for connecting to people. And then the Your Kids Don't Suck podcast content, I'm just like, I'm all in. It's like so cool to me. It's so cool. But so yeah, I'm a non-parent. I'm I'm mid 30s. I'm a queer person. I'm gender non-conforming. I use they and she pronouns interchangeably. I'm a white person. I'm AFAB, so I think that's important to say. I'm assigned female at birth, which is so important for contextualizing how I was socialized in this world. I was socialized as a girl, or I was raised as a girl, socialized as a woman, and then also like, taught to be a caregiver. So I think that all of those things are so important for my identity. And why does non-coercive collaborative parenting even like hit me and relate to me? I think it has to do with the fact that I've been on a recovery journey. So I'm recovering. I'm in recovery. I don't really think recovering. I don't think you can fully be recovered from BPD, borderline personality disorder. So it's for anyone who doesn't know, it's, as far as I understand it, it's like how you express and relate. It's a very relational disorder, neurodivergence. I don't really know like if disorder is the right word for me. But in my BPD recovery journey, a big part of it has been reparenting. You guys like mentioned that I have like this like joy and this like play and this like childlike wonder. And like, to be honest, like that has definitely always been there. But like, I'm at a place right now, even though I'm 35, that I'm like, I must honor the kid in me but like this home that I live in is like literally a playground. Like I have like teddy bears and I have like a bed that's like you have to like jump up to get onto it. It's like, yeah, the kismet of it all, of me coming into non-coercive collaborative parenting philosophy from a work standpoint, like with my BPD recovery journey, is like it's unlike anything I could have ever expected in my recovery.
Wow. So it's been like a win, 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 win.
Yeah, I think, and also parts work is something that's really interesting, and I don't know what came first, if like you guys talking about it in regards to like parenting and healing, if I like learned about it through there, or if it like already came up in my therapy. I don't remember where it came in, but like its parts work has been like a huge aspect of my healing.
We've never talked about BPD. I don't know if there's more we could get into, but that would be of interest.
I'm
What do you
happy
feel
to
like?
share about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like,
We don't know a lot about it at all.
Like if you
okay.
would talk about maybe, I mean, I'm curious, how did you get there?
Okay, so this is so interesting because I actually really do think BPD, having BPD as an adult and having a childhood that didn't validate is extremely connected. So
Yeah.
like I just want to say my mom and my dad and my stepdad, they're wonderful parents. Okay, like they need to know that I love them dearly, but they were also very young when they had me. They were in their, my mom and my dad were 21 and like 19 when they had me. I was their first kid. So like we can all understand what it's like being in our 20s and not knowing ourselves and not understanding, not even having like emotional maturity ourselves, and then having a child and just like loving that child so much and like trying to do everything you can for this kid. And so I didn't necessarily develop BPD because my parents like neglected me or because there was like verbal abuse. It was actually just that the circumstances that we were in, like I sort of was invalidated because I needed to be like this, like strong, like you're confident, you got this. Like, and then my parents separated and I was 5 years older than my sister. So I really took on a caretaking role and nobody in my family said, that's not your responsibility.
Mm.
It's funny because I'm watching these home videos with my sister and my mom right now, and I'm like 13 in the videos, which is like, or 12, which is like right the year before my parents got separated. You could really see how I naturally
Mm.
caretook.
Mm-hmm.
And my mom and I were talking about this, and I was like, I think it would have been really good for someone to say, like, you don't have to do that. That's
Mm-hmm.
not your job. So, and then because I was naturally good at caretaking, I also had this like sort of, I was adultified or whatever it's called, like very
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
adultified. And so then there was like this invalidation of like my own needs as a kid. And then also my parents had this like way of like kind of telling me how I felt and telling me what I should do. And I really like responded to that. And so then fast forward to being an adult, being out on your own. And part of BPD is lacking self-trust. So when you guys talk about helping your kid develop self-trust and helping your kid develop intuition, even from like Aaliyah's age, for example, 3 years old, like, or two and a half, like, I really feel that on such a deep level because I think that also with my parents being so young and wanting to just protect me so much, I think they just really wanted me to be safe and they were really trying to like tell me and show me.
Mm-hmm.
But by doing that, I essentially came into adulthood with no understanding of like my boundaries, my needs, like everything was about like pleasing and being this like person whose worth was defined by caretaking. And so part of my journey in the last year has been to understand and recover that like self-trust.
Would you say your parents were coercive or punishing, shaming, withdrawing their love? You know, how would you say you were brought up with coercion?
That's so interesting. So, yes. So, in two ways, there was a lot of conditions.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
So, in the one way, my dad, as an immigrant person, his family immigrated from Italy, and he was the only one of 7 kids to get a post-secondary education.
Mm.
So he was very like money focused and very like scarcity mindset. So like a lot of our relationship, and even to this day, is about like money as like sort of a reward, as like a
Mm.
proof of worth. So like I don't know how to like tangibly talk about that in terms of coercion, but there was definitely
Yeah.
that.
Well,
Yeah.
that's conditional, like
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
conditional love, and the value is not on who you are, but
Yeah.
it's on what you do, what you give, all of that.
Exactly. And I feel like I had to
It's
prove it.
externally focused, which is a
Hmm.
form of coercion. It is definitely a form of coercion because it's not, the relationship is not the focus.
Certainly. And it was very confusing for me because I didn't relate to people in that way, like in terms of like a tangible like exchange like that. That's not how I related, you know?
Hmm.
And then with my mom, you know, and I want to give my mom so much gratitude right now for the fact that she's on her own recovery journey. But, you know, in her early 30s, when I was starting to question her relationship to substances and get into fights that she wouldn't remember the next day, I was totally blamed.
Mm.
I was called like judgmental
Mm.
from I like 11. My sense of reality was like questioned because I saw something that I couldn't quite put my finger on because I didn't know what substance and addiction was at 11.
Uh, so
Yeah.
how does BPD manifest for you, or how did it, or how does it now at this point? Both.
Yeah, that's such a good question. So I would say, like, at this stage, at 35, I've been diagnosed now for 2 years. At this stage, I probably don't exhibit as many qualities. So there's like nine kind of like checklist things that you sort of have to exhibit to be considered someone to be diagnosed with BPD. I don't exhibit many of those right now because of my recovery journey. But how it did manifest for most of my 20s was, I think the biggest thing is how it manifested for me was just not knowing what I needed, not knowing how to express what I needed, and really, really depending on the people in my life to tell me what I needed. And when they didn't, I felt let down. I felt
Hmm.
abandoned. I felt alone. Something else that for me, it really manifested for me was chronic loneliness. Like I could have like all the love and all the care and all the, you know, people and the chronic loneliness. I just felt like I was alone.
Mm.
And so part of the recovery of addressing the chronic loneliness is also realizing like I have a home within myself,
Mm.
which again, like was something I never really like, it goes back to the self-trust. Like I always said to my mom and my sister, I remember crying and crying and crying. Like, I just wish I had a partner who could just take care of me and make me dinner. And now I don't have the same feeling because I finally know like I could do those things for myself. And like I am my own partner. I am my own parent.
Well, you know, it's wild because when you talk about this diagnosis, you sound so empowered.
I am now, but I was,
Oh, because yeah, I think of it as a stigmatized diagnosis. Like people like have a lot of judgment about it. Usually means like you rage a lot and
yeah. Well, actually, it's funny because what was the episode when we were talking about anger and or Kara was talking about being like 11 and being like,
Mm. Like
anyways, there was
cat called.
cat called and then like anger around it, and then there was like you guys have talked about anger
Yeah.
in kids a lot, and
Yeah.
I do think that like people with BPD rage a lot because like our feelings are so invalidated, so there's like
Yeah.
lots of rage. So yeah, I've definitely like raged.
Yeah. Well, there's something about performance inside of all of this, like really just loneliness, not knowing who you really are, not knowing who to turn to, wanting a mommy, but you know, your mom isn't available in that way, right? Needing a caretaker, but yet you've been the caretaker historically. How else are we supposed to feel except for enraged so much of the time? I think that is something that is seen with folks who have a BPD diagnosis or, you know, feel like that's something that they align with. And I think a lot of it has to do with just having to suppress.
Yeah, and I will say what's really interesting is so I got a diagnosis during the first year of like the pandemic, like
Yeah.
lockdowns, and I got a diagnosis, and I got diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, and then that was it, and like that's where it landed. And then like 2 years went by, and I was like, I really feel like there's something more. So I asked for another diagnosis. I went and I got diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, and the psychiatrist who provided me with a diagnosis actually asked me if I wanted to be diagnosed with this because of the stigma.
Yeah.
And he was like, you don't have to take this diagnosis. And I was like, but I was confused, you know, but then when I started doing more research and reading, I understood like the negative things that go along with it. But people with BPD are extremely intuitive.
Yeah.
We just don't know. We know that we can sense something, but we don't know how to like trust that. So, but we have this deep intuition. We're really, really, really passionate about relationships, and we're really loyal.
Mm.
Now the diagnosis is empowering.
Yeah, it's empowering now, and I think that I honestly will say that like learning about the non-coercive collaborative parenting philosophy has been part of the empowerment because I can kind of understand how my relationship with my parents sort of affected how I am. And then I can also see how the kind of parenting that I probably could have benefited from
Mm.
is something I can apply to myself now.
That's amazing.
Oh my God, we should really talk about that. That
That
is
is just amazing. Like I am, my stomach is like I just got like a gut punch of like, wow, that is so amazing and profound what you're saying.
Thank you.
it's also like it's so hard to ask all of these parents to try to shift the way they are with their children when they don't have it inside themselves. They haven't even applied it to themselves first. Like how are you supposed to give it to your kid if you haven't even applied it to yourself? You know?
Yeah.
And yet we have to talk about parenting because they're parenting all day every day. So we have to talk about all the behaviors that the parents are doing.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that it's really interesting because even though I'm not a parent, I have a lot of really close relationships with kids of various ages. So like I get to see how I'm observing a lot of like how parents, just because they're people, feel awkward and weird and they feel like they're going to be under scrutiny if they like let their kid do a thing or like, I have some neighbors who like come to my house. We have a very like open door policy, but the dad, he has a little bit of like an apologist vibe. And not because he thinks his kid's doing anything wrong, but because he thinks he's making me uncomfortable as someone in my home. And I'm like, I don't care. Like, your kid can move. This kid is so cute. She'll come in, she'll grab everything, she'll move it into different places. Like, it's like, I love it. But he's like, I'm so sorry. No, no, those are Joey's things. And I'm like, honestly, what are things other than to share, you know?
Mhm.
Right.
So I think the work that I'm doing with myself is something that I hope to carry into when I'm a parent.
Mhm.
Like I am planning to have children and to raise a family, and I really hope to carry this work. Like I do want to be parenting myself for my whole life, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to be a healthy person, if you want to be a good parent or, a loving parent, you're going to have to. There isn't really a choice. That's the
Mm.
whole thing. We have prepared you for the shit show that will life. I hope we've like made it real to you, the reality of the level of work that it brings you into. It's like a PhD program all the time and never ends.
I think about that too, where I'm like, sometimes I get grumbly about having to do my dishes. And I think Kara saw my Instagram reel about this or something about when I was sick. And I was like, there's always fucking dishes. There's always dishes. And I was like, and imagine now I'm just taking care of just one person. Imagine now taking care of, on the level that I'm taking care of myself, applying that level of care to like another human.
Right. And also, no matter how much work you do on yourself to prepare, you also can't prepare.
Mm.
You don't know what that being you're going to have is going to bring you to. And there's
Yeah.
you can work in as hard and as fast as you can, but then you also can't prepare.
I really thought I was prepared.
I thought I was prepared too.
I thought I was absolutely certain that I was so prepared.
I was
Um,
42. I had
mm,
been a single person up to the age of 42 years old. And I had been in therapy for a bazillion years.
mhm.
Mm.
There's no one, I am so on my game. And I
Mm.
loved kids all my life. I was great at playing with kids. Anyway, you just don't know.
Well, and I think that that's another, I was reflecting yesterday about elements of like my life and how non-coercive collaborative parenting is linked. And I think the control thing is another one that's really interesting. I would say that I am, because of that like natural or like learned caregiving, there's this sense of like having to control.
Mm.
And a perfect example is like, this is really funny. So my sister is 5 years younger than me, and when she was like 19, so then, okay, maybe she was 18 and I was like, 24 or whatever. And she was like, what are we doing for Christmas? And I remember that year I was like, I am not planning Christmas this year. I have been planning Christmas since I was 13,
Mm.
like, where me and my sister are going to be, who's what aunt, what time does my dad pick us up, like all that stuff. And so my sister asks me, what are we doing for Christmas this year? And I go, Jordan, I'm sorry, but like I'm going to show up wherever you guys tell me to be. I'm not planning it. And she was like, okay. And so then she is like, okay, fine. She doesn't think it's a big deal. She's like, starts kind of getting into it, asking my parents. Literally within 2 weeks, my sister is like, hold on, you've been doing this? And I was like, uh-huh, I've been doing this. And like, it totally also shifted everything for me because I was like, I've had to like be this planner and then also had to have like control of the
Yeah.
situation. And then the control then like kind of goes into like, oh, I want like controlling myself, controlling how I act, controlling how other people act. And I think like you saying that you're not going to know what kind of being you're going to get. I feel in my heart that that's something I'm going to have to be, that I'm going to be that it's going to be I think that's going to be a very big one for me.
Mm.
Right. And that is a huge, huge trigger for so many parents is they didn't envision their kid this way, or their kid wasn't going to like those things, or their kid wasn't going to act that way, and their kid wasn't going to be rude, and their kid wasn't going to resist them, and their kid, whatever. They weren't going to have that temperament. They weren't going to be an introvert. They were going to be an extrovert.
Yeah.
They were going to be creative, or they were going to be really good at certain things, or or they weren't going to be neurodiverse, and they weren't going to be that neurodiverse, and all of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. My parents had to deal with the fact of like me changing my name
Mm.
in my early 30s. And then, like, I don't think my parents really minded too much about me coming out as queer or gay or bisexual or even asking them to use they pronouns. Like, they're like, yeah, cool. But it was the name change that really
Mm.
was hard for them. And I think that's also this sense of like they had a really concrete idea of like
Mm.
who I was, and then as an adult, I'm no longer like honoring that.
Mm.
Mhm.
And
That's
I
powerful.
think, yeah. And like I will say that like part of my gender nonconforming journey and name change journey has been so joyous for me that when I noticed my parents having negativity around it, I was like very calm and I was like, this is joyous for me. If you guys have problems, like go talk to someone about it. Because like I'm good. I'm having a great time with this.
Huh. That's awesome. So I would like to hear more about how this approach has affected your parenting yourself.
Mm,
I think bringing up control is a really like sort of that is the center of the whole thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's coming out of control-based parenting into collaborative. I wonder
Mm.
what collaboration means as an individual. Is that a spiritual thing? It's like collaborating with your maker or like your core self or like, if you're not just controlling everything, what does that look like?
oh my gosh, I love that question. Well, I think it's like, I think a lot of it has been about not having the answer immediately and also like not feeling, there's this like phrase in dialectical behavior therapy called rest,
Mm.
but I forget what the R stands for, but my therapist says you pause.
Mhm.
Hey, Kara, do you remember it?
Let me pull it up. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
relax. Oh, sorry. It went away. Rest is relax, evaluate, set an intention, and take action.
Yeah. So I bring up,
Rest, evaluate, set an intention, and take action.
Oh, nice.
yeah, I bring that up from dialectical behavior therapy because that's one of the ways in which I've been able to like collaborate with myself is like by pausing and or resting, as the acronym says. And evaluating is sort of like you do a check-in with like all the scenarios and like even like the different parts that are like kind of flaring up. And are there other people involved? Is it me? Is it like, what do I do? Set an intention is like a big one. I'm a big writer, but through my somatic like art therapy, I've been like drawing, and that's cool because that's like sometimes the intention that you need to set is not for me. Sometimes the intention that I need to set is not clear, but like the drawing will kind of like bring it out.
Mhm.
And then the take action part is like kind of you have all of the tools finally, and you can like go ahead and do it. And I think I think I've also just like, I mean, this sounds like so funny to say that it's not like every time there's a conflict within me, I'm like stopping and I'm referring to the notepad or anything, but I am slowing way down.
Mm.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so much about control inside of like a parenting and reparenting paradigm is about reacting. You know,
Right.
stopping something from happening or making something happen and taking the lead. And so you become authoritarian in that dynamic. You have like almost internally or externally this part of you that is like jumping ahead. And I think REST, these acronyms are really helpful. The parts work model is helpful because it invites you to slow down, like you said. And also, self-compassion is kind of
Hmm.
inherent in that model as well, because you have to sort of like look inside of your internal landscape and see, and it's values work. It's like, what do we really want here? And how can I work with myself instead of against myself or the person in front of me and take control? I need to, really sit with myself and make peace with my feelings and hopelessness or, this trigger that's kind of like engulfing me. It's really hard. So even just to like look at control in this context and say like I'm not going to do that anymore. Whatever you do in between and then the next steps that you take is like yeah, it's a complete shift and it takes so
Hmm.
much intention.
Well, you said not knowing right away. That's
Hmm.
something that parents really need to learn. It's so hard for them. I mean, me and Kara also, including us, you see something in your kid and you go, but what about when they're an adult? Or like, what about when they're a teenager and they do that thing?
Mm.
Or like, what if they're not cleaning their room and then they grow up and they can't clean anything? Like parents are take these things about their children and then they go 20 years ahead and then they freak out. I mean, parents do this all the time. They can't trust that children develop, that time has its way on us, that circumstance has its way on us, that they'll change, that will change. Like there's just no faith. Part of the skill around reparenting ourselves is being able to rest and pause in the unknown and not know.
And trust the process because someone wrote the other day in one of these groups or something that we're in, like in a gentle parenting space online that was like, how do you trust your kid? How do you trust your kid? Because that's the question. And I think, it starts with how do you trust yourself? How do you trust
Mm.
any form of process? How do you just sit with discomfort and not know? And, that I think is really, really integral to all of this.
Yeah, I feel like telling him this is kind of like a self-parenting story. It's related to what we're saying is my body doesn't want to make videos. I mean, I've been making videos literally non-stop for a year and a half. I haven't not stopped. I made them almost every day, then I made them 3 times a week, and I was always thinking about it, and I was so in love with it. It was so joyful for me, because I sent them to you constantly. I sent them to you constantly.
Hmm.
And I just had so much to say. I would say, God, I'm never gonna run out of ideas. I have a million videos I could make. And for all these different circumstances and reasons, and I just cannot get myself to make even one goddamn video right now. And I'm sitting in an empty space. I teach lots of classes online, and I've been slowly asking the question of what do I want to lead that is 100% non-draining to me.
Hmm.
So, for some reason, the parenting groups were feeling like draining. So I stopped doing this. I just led a support group, a writing group for survivors of sexual abuse. That was not draining at all. I don't know why. It was just completely
Hmm.
gave me energy. And I'm sitting in an open space, and it's so important to actually not know so that things can actually like gestate. And I can listen in, and my whole process right now is about how to not drain my energy.
So good.
Hmm.
It takes a lot of self-trust. You have to build that trust that something will come. Even when
Hmm.
there's money involved, like also it's like I got all my coaching people from my videos and that's not happening now. And I have to like, find other ways to support myself and just trust like I have to trust this transition, which is I know very easy for me to say as a whatever, privileged middle class white female.
Hmm.
Hmm. Well, I also think about what's the word? Like what are our basic needs, right? Like I'm currently involved with like a lot of people who are living in precariously housed situations. So people who are either living on the streets or in shelters or in tents. And it's given me a lot of it's basically amplified my knee-jerk reaction to try to control a situation, to try to caregive our way out of a situation, to try to problem solve and make lists.
Hmm.
But like, there's two things happening here for me. Number one, these are people who know themselves. They have autonomy, and the system that they're in tries to take away their autonomy. So, as somebody who's like, just, I don't work in this field, I'm just a person who cares. I have to go and turn to them and say, like, what is it that you need? You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And trust that they know. Of course, these people are adults; they're not children. But I think like we're talking about trust. And then, secondly, is letting go of the outcome has something that I've had to really apply in this situation, because these are people with their own lives and their own journeys. And even though I'm intrinsically involved and I care and I hug these people, and sometimes I see tears and sometimes I bandage wounds, and I have to be okay with not knowing what the outcome is going to be. And so having to apply that to an external thing, I think has been really helpful for applying it to my life.
Yeah.
I'm also 35, and I like have been crying and crying and crying for years about not having a partner and wanting a child and wanting a family. And I've had to let that go too, because I'm like, girl, get it together. Like, you're gonna get the things you want. It's fine. But like, it felt so painful for so long to not have the outcome that I was like really desiring.
Wow.
Mm.
I like this topic, self-parenting. I think it's a really good topic.
I bet when you listen to this podcast, you're thinking, oh my gosh, I wish I could call Rathia Lee. Because that's why I reached out to her in the first place. I was a fan of Rathia's. I watched her TikToks. I wrote her. I said, look, we are going to need to collaborate because I love you and I'm in love with you. And I bet if you're listening to this, you're like, I want Rathia's guidance. I want to directly talk to Rathia too. Well, you can and you should, because Rathia actually offers 30-minute support sessions with people who need input on stuck places in their parenting. And I can tell you, as her friend, I use her all the time via voice notes. And I want you to know that so can you. You just need to go to the link in our show notes to book a mentoring session with Rathia. She offers 30-minute sessions for parents, and she also has a weekly session open at a reduced rate for low-income and BIPOC individuals. So if you could use some of Rathia's clear, confident, loving, connected, supportive, and brilliant advice, then you need to head over to calendly.com/Rathia or rathia.com. And those links will be in the show notes.
My somatic art therapy with my therapist, she applies parts work to our sessions, and she is really on this kick of me being a parent to this part of mine that's called baby heart. And baby heart is like so cute and just like wants to hang out and wants to like be loved and wants to be seen and wants to be frolicked. And baby heart has all of these protectors who kind of look like royal, almost like tarot card like characters. And they're all around baby heart all the time. And I'm like, I want in. I want to hang with baby heart. And everyone is like, I don't know. Like, we don't know if you can do it. And so my therapist is like, how can you become one of baby heart's parents? Like, these protectors around baby heart are baby heart's caregivers. You have to be able to be a caregiver for baby heart.
Take care of her.
Yeah. I love her.
Well, but she doesn't want you to, she doesn't trust you yet.
No. But like, we're getting there. And
What
like,
does she think you're gonna do? Just like make her be something she doesn't want to be, or do something she doesn't want to do? Or invalidate her?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think she sees that I'm gonna like scoop her up and we're gonna go over here. We're gonna do this thing
She's
over
like,
here.
no, I have a voice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, in one of my sessions, I was like I was envisioning I was at this gathering and this party, and instead of scooping up baby heart for her to come play with me, I just sort of like enjoyed the party on my own and sort of like did my own thing, and like we would like sort of be in tandem with each other, and that was like our first sort of like, hey, look, it's all good, I'm here.
Yeah, and I mean, you can just see how this work so applies to like the child that you eventually have, as a parent, like doing this internal practice.
Oh.
to join your kid and join your kid's world and see your child for the whole human being that they are and really attuning to like, do they want me? Is this right? Me scooping them up and bringing them over here. How are they responding to that? Is that actually something that they're on board with? Like, is there full consent here or has it just been assumed?
Hmm.
Am I really just controlling another person or am I actually in partnership with another person? Like, these are all such deep questions. I even think that for a lot of folks who work with people who are in like, unhoused situations and vulnerable folks, like there's a lot of assumptions being made, like you said, like solution focused activism, when what we're missing in that is not even hearing what is the problem.
It's wild. It's like the invalidation that people who are at the mercy of a system, and goes to kids too. It's
Yeah.
like kids are part of the oppressive system. That's why I think this philosophy also really like fires me up, is because I see it as another layer of our oppressive systems. Like
Yeah.
the same way that patriarchy tries to hold women and AFABs down, the same way that transphobia puts trans people as like, villains.
Hmm.
Um, the same way that our carceral system is like rooted in colonialism, and it's another form of oppression. And it's like a child is, yes, not quite a fully formed human yet, but they still are a being. I
Hmm.
actually even feel this way about my pets, which is crazy. And my one rat doesn't like getting picked up, but I'm like, whatever, that's her choice. She doesn't want to be held, she doesn't want to be picked up.
Hmm. Hmm. But it's so funny though, because I feel like so many people who aren't on board with this non-coercion stuff could understand that. Like I feel like I've had
Mm.
conversations with parents who are authoritative that like they'll talk to their animals better than they'll talk to their kids. They're like, and I just find that really interesting. It's you're so right that like all beings are deserving of someone who can really listen.
I just want to say that I've been doing these meditations for my daughter. This came to me from listening to the telepathy tapes podcast. It came to me that I could start to connect with my daughter's spirit with and tell her things and do things that she was not letting me do right now. You know what I mean? So in my meditations, I take 10 minutes and I just imagine that I'm holding her and I tell her
Mm.
things that I want to be telling her about how strong she is, how powerful she is, how I see her pain. What she's been saying in therapy is that no one sees her pain. So in the meditations, I say, I really see how much pain you're in. I see it. And I like really picture it. And um, the first time I did that meditation that night, she said, will you hold me? Like in real life, she said, will you hold me? Like she hadn't asked me to do that in weeks. So, and then I'm trying to do it for myself. I'm like, I need to do that for myself. I need to hold my little parts and say, I see how much pain you're in. I know what you've been through. You wouldn't go through that alone. I got you. We're so powerful. We can change anything we need to. I don't know, whatever. And it's much, much, much harder with myself. Much.
Yeah.
Million,
Yeah.
billion, trillion times harder. Why? Why is it so much harder?
I think it's because it's like anger towards a person who's like no longer there. It's easier to be angry at somebody who's like physically in space with you. So like when you're trying to like give consoling to yourself, you're more of like you're, yes, you are here physically, you can feel yourself, but you're also like in your body. Whereas like with your kid, I feel like you could see this person. It's like
Right.
easier to like tangibly understand
So
that you're
true.
giving energy to this
It's actually
being.
so funny you say that because I was talking about this exact thing recently with my therapist and I said like I'm really triggered by my kid when she's not doing something that we need to do to get to the next thing. Like, the classic toddler, like I'm not gonna whatever, I don't know, leave the house and we have to go, stuff like that. And I just said, oh my God, I'm just enraged. And I think it's because, I have like an authoritarian parent in my head that's like mad at her and being like, you would have never, little Kara, gotten away with this. So therefore we should like come down hard on her because like this behavior is just so disrespectful. And my therapist was like, yeah, you need a visual cue. You need a visual cue of you as a little girl to put up in your living room where you are when you're engaging with this, which is when I texted you. I was like, we need to, yeah, we were talking about photos of me.
Yeah.
And it was so helpful because I realized that like if I had a photo of me as a little kid, and then that would be a visual reminder of like she's still in there and this is the block. This is the block to getting regulated enough to being able to extend compassion to your child. Because actually, I don't want to be the authoritarian parent, but the voice is so loud. So, what is the barrier to taking a step back and being able to get to that self-compassion place was actually that, like, there was no tangible cue for me to do the inner child work in that moment that I actually really need to do. Once I was able to get in touch with like activist mommy, who's like that part of me that is non-coercive, she's really like, oh, come on, guys, we're good. We get you. You're a protector. But you know what? We've got it from here. We love little Kara. We love little Lilia. They're safe with us too. We can still find a collaborative way of connecting and moving through this moment. We don't have to get upset and get angry and yell, and it's okay. And yeah, it just really was helpful to have like an actual visual picture of me, little 3-year-old me, who was not treated like that, in these moments of real dysregulation in my family system. Now I see her face
I'm
and I'm like, oh, that's like the missing piece for me.
I'm literally writing that down.
Isn't that cool?
I'm like, where am I gonna put that?
Yeah.
We haven't done an episode on merged parts yet, right? We're gonna do that.
Yeah. Yeah. We have it in our list.
So merged parts, Joey, in the
Mhm.
work I'm trained in, it's called inner bonding. But your merged part is the part that's merged with the people who hurt you.
Yeah.
And that is what all parents are struggling with. And that's what makes them punishing, is that they're enacting the person who punished them, or the people
Unconsciously.
unconsciously, or the system that punished them, or the
Yeah.
system that oppressed them. It's an imprint. And
Yeah.
then they run it on themselves, and that's what you're talking about. And that is why it's hard for me to hold myself, because I have so many merged parts that go, you don't fucking deserve this. Or
Oh
it doesn't make
wow.
a difference, or does, won't make, who cares? It won't make any difference. That's a big one. I have like despairing parts that like,
It's like that, what was the guest on season one, maybe like the fifth episode, and she talked about how when she works with like Black parents and she really starts to think
Mm.
about epigenetics.
Tanisha. Yeah. Tanisha.
I was like, that is so incredible because so deeply, it could, in someone's history, it could be last generation or it could be generations prior.
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
And
Like
that
so
is,
deep beyond, like you might not even have a memory of it at all. Like
yeah.
not even a little bit, just a feeling.
But that's also why, if you do decide to slow your process down as a parent or a person, either one, like a
Mhm.
regular person who does just or a parent, if you slow it down, you will start to have unbearable feelings. So what are you going to do about that? Like
Yeah.
that's one of the issues. Like what are your outlets? What's your support system? Because that is, if you don't have that, you can't do this. You can't.
Yes,
Well,
because
we're
here's
not
the
given it. Yeah.
no, and here's the thing. It's like thinking about all of this as like a metaphor for like just continuing on. Literally like with like in traditional parenting, right? The advice is just like find a way to push through your child's no or whatever. Like for toddlers, okay? So young kids, this is like the general go-to. Set the boundary, validate the feeling, but keep it moving. You don't let your kid,
Mm,
like for example, putting a kid's coat on that doesn't want to put their coat on.
just put it on.
Bear with me, put it on, and I see it all the time. I see it every single time I go somewhere. This is
Yeah.
what parents do. They take their toddler, they go, I'm sorry, it is time to put your coat on. I know you don't want to, it's time to put it on. They just put it on, the kid cries or whatever, but they just keep it moving. But when you actually pause and you have to sit and listen to your kids screaming and yelling to get to a place where you collaborate, that's fucking difficult for people. They don't feel like they have the time. They don't feel like they have the tools. They feel like they just like, why would they do it? Because
Yeah.
it's just going to
It's also
prolong.
triggering.
It's so triggering.
Triggering as fuck. It's actually more triggering to hear your child cry and to sit with their feelings and then your own helplessness, and then just put the damn coat on.
Exactly. So you just want to end it all and get to the next thing. And it's like, it's such a metaphor for like having to be productive, like never
Oh, I
resting
was
because
just gonna say
because like
productivity.
it's just like, yeah, it's Puritan, like puritanical, like productivity, bullshit.
Yeah.
Well, it's capitalism at its best. It's like and I was thinking about this the other day too. I've been saying this thing. I've been saying I'm a recovering girl boss.
Yeah.
And that, if you don't like resonate with that, that's like basically millennials version of like success, especially as an AFAB person, especially as a young girl growing up in this like world of like Nasty Gal. If anybody
Hmm.
remembers her, she started an Etsy shop and she like became this like girl boss phenomenon. Like I had my own music blog and I was a music manager and I was like doing all these things and I was like applying for grants and I was entrepreneur this, entrepreneur that. And then the pandemic happened and all of it started crumbling. There was no foundation for it to stand on. And since then, so I guess since 2019, I've been in girl boss recovery mode, which
Hmm.
is like basically a synonym for slowing it all down and realizing that your worth is not tied to your work. It's not
Hmm.
tied to like a money outcome, nor is it even tied to status, you know, or like, so I think the coat thing is really interesting because I'm seeing the coat thing as like a task that an adult needs to achieve.
Hmm. Exactly. Yeah. We have to do the next thing. And it doesn't matter how my kid feels about it or even how I feel about it. And that is like what is so profound to me is like our worth is actually tied, in my opinion, to our relationships. Because that's real resilience is how we, involve our community inside of our healing and inside of our connection. And that's how we feel, that's how we thrive as a social human animal is
Okay, but
inside of our
Kara,
relationships.
since we happen to be here in this moment, could you tell us how you would do it instead of
Oh, a kid's coat situation?
yeah, well,
I
Yeah.
sure can.
I would love to know.
Well, okay, I've never forced my kid's coat on her. Can you believe that? She's almost 3. She'll be 3 in a couple months. I've never done it. I think one time or maybe twice, I will admit and say 2 times in her life, I've forced her teeth brushing, but it was real quick. I took it right out of there after I realized she wasn't having it. So things like this, I don't force her to do anything. I mean, I've never forced her in her stroller. I've never forced her in her car seat. Never.
yeah, I never forced my daughter into her car seat either.
Never.
I have a an outerwear example with an
Yeah.
actual child that I experienced.
Yeah.
So my cousin has a kid. Me and my cousin grew up together. We're super, super close, and her kid is 2.5, and he loves me, calls me JoJo. We're super tight. We're thick as thieves. So it was time to play outside, and Lucas needed to put on his mittens, and he did not want to put his mittens on, but he was totally cool with everything else. It's just the mittens. And so my cousin is doing everything. She's like, sitting, waiting, he's having a moment, and she's not being like, she's not saying you can't go outside unless you wear them. She's saying it's very important to put your mittens on. And then so eventually we start a mitten song. I have these mittens on and my cousin gets her mittens. She's not even coming outside. And we have our mittens on and we're doing a mitten song. And so he starts doing the mitten song. And then we're like, but you need your mittens for the mitten song. And so it took us so long to get the mittens on.
Yeah. I love that example. And I feel like that's such a good one because that's kind of how I work too. I mean, play, we always talk about it constantly on this show. It's like play is a great tool. But there's also just like, there's so many things that you can do. And you need to be working with your kid every step of the way because I'll do something like a mitten song and my kid's like, I'm not doing that with you right
I
now.
don't like the
Fuck
mitten
that.
song.
Your mitten song sucks. And I'll be like trying to make her laugh in all these sorts of ways. And I think also my kid is really like, I know what you're trying to get me to do. You're trying to manipulate me in a playful way to put on a coat, and I'm not doing it. And I've really accepted, I think I've like been really good at just trusting her. Like, I think that's what it
Mm.
is like if she's cold and her hands are freezing, she'll put her mittens on. And so I don't need her to do much of anything because I'm actually okay with the fact that she may not. And so
Ooh.
all of those playful things are really helpful. And certainly I use all of them. But if she doesn't want to wear a coat, she just doesn't wear a coat. And I guarantee 5 minutes after we're outside and it's minus, it's super freezing, below freezing, she's going to put it on and she's going to have the idea herself. And I've also really noticed that whenever
And is that what
something's,
happens?
hmm,
Is that what happens?
that's what happens.
Do
That's
you
what
go
happens
out
every time.
she goes, I need my coat, and then you put
I
it on
just
her.
bring it. I just bring her mittens. I bring her coat. The other day she didn't wear her coat home. It was 15 minutes we had to walk home. She didn't wear her coat home. So Sanjay picked her up and she was shivering. And I said, "Oh, you're cold." And she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I got your coat." And she was like, "No." But she wasn't gonna freeze.
Okay,
She was
but
up in
I
his
hear all
arms.
the parents. The parents are like, no, now my kid's gonna get sick, and I don't have the energy for my kid to be sick. Like we have a lot to do, and
Well,
I
my
don't.
kid's never gotten sick from being cold for 5 minutes. I'm sorry. That just doesn't happen.
Oh, okay.
There are also things like like
Good, good, good.
No, there are things that I
No,
think
but that's the whole thing is
we have
people
to
make
let
up
go of like
stories
preconceived
of what's going to happen.
yeah,
People have
you
a
can't.
million stories about what will happen if their kid doesn't do this. My kid has not been wearing a coat the entire year.
Middle
So
schoolers never wear coats,
They
people.
never
They
wear
literally don't.
coats.
It's like the unwritten rule of middle school. You can't wear a coat if you're 13 years old. Like you can't. I feel like I need to also say
Mm.
about this whole coat situation that like I've written so much about we sometimes do need to have our kids do things, obviously. Like for example, I have to take my kid to the doctor. I'm going to do that. That's something that like, but we always talk about have to. We have to, have to, have to. That doesn't mean that we need to use force and coercion to elicit cooperation. And with the coat thing, like the other day we were all out. There's another toddler. The parent goes and puts the kid's coat on because they're going to the car. But in this place that we're in, the cars are right outside. They're not far away at all. You only have to walk, 30 seconds to get to your car. So there's no need to put the kid's coat on in that situation. And it actually was fine. The kid didn't really freak out, but like it's kind of like a grab the kid, put the coat on. But I think that all of these micro moments are places where we can build trust with our kids to elicit cooperation in the future when we have to do something because my kid really trusts me. Like if I tell her, I'm so sorry, like I have to do this thing with you, like we have to go now or we have to X or I don't know. There's so many things that you have to do with little kids that they might not want to do and they might not just be like jumping at the bit to join you on. She actually is really willing to hear me and to be like, oh, I get it. Okay. Because if I can give her leeway anywhere, if I can trust her and have her be in the driver's seat, I'm always going to. And I'm so passionate about giving her the steering wheel whenever possible. That I
Mhm.
just feel like that really builds so much trust between two individuals that you're going to be able to explain in the situations and actually have them understand you because you've shown them this long history of like, if I didn't have to, I wouldn't. If we didn't have to, I wouldn't, you know?
We use the word you build trust, but I was also I'm not a metaphor person, but I know there's a metaphor for this. But it's also building resource because people say I don't have the time to collaborate. Who can collaborate on all these things and negotiate everything all day long? Like I have a life and we have things we have to do, blah blah blah. But when you do actually build collaboration, it builds up this resource of tolerance
Yeah.
because children that are controlled all the time are in constant resistance. So that becomes the relationship is that they're resisting being controlled and they act out. They do all kinds of things to not be controlled. And that creates another kind of time suck. That's a whole other kind of time suck that erodes the foundation of your relationship with them.
Yeah, and I think in terms of the energy output that it might take to collaborate, I'm relating it to the ways in which my energy has shifted since I have been in BPD recovery. So I truly
Mm.
would spend most of my time, even my self-care time, would be basically rehabilitating myself from my breakdowns.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm not really necessarily doing that because I'm taking proper rest before
Mm.
I'm actually having a breakdown, before I've like crossed my own boundaries, before I've like overextended
Mm.
myself. I think I was resistant to my own needs and I was resistant to wanting to heal. I even was
Mm.
resistant to even accepting that I have BPD, accepting the
Mm.
diagnosis. And I was very resistant because it had such a stigma to it. And I also didn't want to I was like, another thing? Like, come on, like I have to do more healing.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'll be ever recovered,
Mm.
but I feel way less tired by it.
Mm. Yeah, and this is everything you're saying is so also applicable to parents who are in the power struggle, the external conflict with their kids. It just is so intense. They can't get out of it. They're like, another thing you're telling me to do? You're telling me to collaborate on top of everything? I have like 50
Mm-hmm.
billion plates spinning at once. And I so get that and empathize with that. It does sound like it's such an intense investment, but it's so true. It's in the short term. Yeah, add something to your plate. You're going to have to relearn a new relational language. It's a lot. And also
Mm-hmm.
do inner healing too. That's, of course, part of it, which is a
Yeah.
lot to think about and to really like spend time examining. But it's for that long-term flow of not just cooperation, but connection. And like, it's just so necessary to be doing the internal and the external at the same time, if that's what you want, if that's what you want in terms of like closeness with yourself and with your kids.
When I started learning that BPD was about how your brain has come to understand like relational patterns, that it was like a neurological like understanding, and that it wasn't like fixed, that you could change the way that your brain responds, understands and then responds. I started being like, well, if I could change that, then I could probably change multiple things about how I respond and react. Like I got myself to a place of feeling like chronic loneliness through a repeated pattern of experiencing abandonment and labeling it abandonment. I've gotten to that, like my, I don't know, my neurological pathways, like that happened. So now there's a, like, if you could do that, then you could do the other thing. Your mind is powerful.
Yeah, and your relationships in the exact same
Mm-hmm.
way. As soon as you
Mm-hmm.
show up differently inside of a relationship, it shifts.
Right. Right. That's with any relationship, and especially our children.
Mm.
But I also want to say, as a therapist, I work a lot with people's self-hating parts. That's like a big piece of therapy. And I teach them how, like a process, like a six-step process to slow it down. Oops. And to slow it down and figure out what part is functioning at each time. And then there's always this thought, like people have a lot of beliefs, like, oh, that sounds so hard. Like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get up every morning and do 20 minutes of process work. Like, oh, that sounds so exhausting. And I'm like, you don't understand. It is a million times more exhausting to get up and be in your self-hating pattern all day, every day. Like that is so much more exhausting than spending a half an hour a day figuring out how to be in your loving adult. But it's so familiar, it's so conditioned that we think it's not exhausting. It's because it's familiar. It's the same with our parenting. It's the exact same thing.
Well, I
Mm-hmm.
also think that this is just reminding me of how, as parents, or I was parented in a way where I experienced feedback as like, it's almost like how I showed up wasn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not my parents meant for that to happen, there was always this thing that I had to change and fix and grow, which I think really correlated to how I developed BPD, and correlated again to like the self, I wouldn't say self-hatred for me necessarily, but definitely like self-critical. I think about what you're saying, Rathia, about like, you know, address your self-hating voice. It's like basically what you're doing is you're rewriting the ways in which you were raised to think that you had something to fix. Like basically all kids are born with like the inherent knowing. And Vivek talks about this too, I think. All kids are born with the inherent knowing. And what happens because of being in capitalism and colonialism and like a patriarchal society, what happens over time is that we're basically told we're not good enough and that we have to fit into this thing. Part of my recovery with BPD and also with ungirl bossing has been to recover that self-trust that I had as a kid.
This is good.
This is so good.
Yeah, it's really rich. All right, well, why don't we do one more question, which is ask
Mm-hmm.
Joey, is there what's anything else you wanted to share either about yourself, about this work, about being part of this work that you didn't get to say?
Well, I did want to talk a little bit about my identity as a gender nonconforming person and the
Mm-hmm.
freedom that comes with that, and how that's also a return to my childlike self.
Mm.
Sometimes people ask me, you know, like, why is gender nonconformity or being non-binary? Like, what is it about, like, for you? And it really is like a sense of freedom, because you're not necessarily having to be in like this box or that box. And I really see that too. Like, I relate it to like being a kid. And I think that like, I think about, you know, the return to my freedom as a kid to have like, to be in any identity. Like it's fun, it's freeing, it's, yeah. So I wanted to share that a little bit. And I also think that parents who may encounter, you know, this need to like put their kids into binaries, like just know that like part of being a gender nonconforming individual is that it's actually a lot more fun to just be like, clothing is fun, expression is fun, this is supposed to be fun.
You know, it sounds so cliche, but it's like, why can't we all just let each other express how we need to express ourselves if it's safe?
And I also think that one thing that's important, I think, for adults to remember is that we have the choice and the agency to change at any time in our life, at 2, at 12, at 22, at 65. Like, you have agency and choice to change. And I remember my family saying, well, what if you want to change your name again? And I was like, then I will.
Mm-hmm.
It's $135 to change my ID. It's not a lot of money. And right now I'm Joey, and maybe down the line I'll be Rosa. And that's cool. And I'll be excited by that.
Mm-hmm.
I love your joy around this. It feels so peaceful to my body.
Thank you. Oh, I just love talking to you guys. Yeah, kids are so cool and so powerful and so fun, and they really can, if you allow it, like return you to like a sense of wonder in this world. We're faced with such oppression. It's so hard to live.
I know they have all the answers, god damn it. And like, geez. I think we touched on some really core things.
Yeah.
It's nice to have you here as not a parent and like keep referring back to the person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Some of the tools you brought in were awesome.
I think one thing to offer like a glimmer of hope too is like having BPD or being diagnosed with BPD doesn't mean that you will be in like struggle forever. Like there is a hope, you know? And like I do talk about it on my Instagram. Actually, I post about BPD. I have like a whole BPD stories little highlight thing. I talk about it in my posts. I make a couple of reels about it. I go to like a BPD support group weekly or whenever I can. And I just think it can become like a powerful thing. And yeah, I think that if you are someone who struggles with it, there's a lot of empowerment around going on your BPD recovery journey.
So where can people find you, Joey?
My Instagram and TikTok and my YouTube channel is hi.itsjoey.
Cool.
Yay!
Joey, you're the freaking best, man. You really are. You really are. You're the coolest.
So fun.
This has been Your Kids Don't Suck. You can find me, Kara Tedstone, at www.karatedstonetherapy.com and on Instagram at Kara Tedstone Therapy. On my website, you'll find links to recommended readings and a link to my Reparenting with Mindfulness workbook, available now on Amazon.
You can find me, Rathia Lee, at www.rathia.com. That's RYTHEA.com. There you'll find published books, articles, and music, and parenting videos. Also, I'm on TikTok at Rathia Lee, on Instagram at Rathia Lee. You can book parent mentoring sessions with me through my website. And also I have an Advice from a Loving Bitch YouTube show that helps people heal self-hatred, and that's rathia.com/advice. It is important and essential to put our voices, Rathia and Kara, in a context. We are two white, cisgendered, straight, middle-class women living with financial and societal privilege. Because of this, our perspectives are limited and do not reflect the realities of all of our listeners. This podcast will feature guests with expertise around conscious parenting who differ in race, class, abilities, sexual orientation, and histories from us, to broaden the conversation and reflect the lives of as many people as possible. 25% of the proceeds of this podcast will go to creators of color who have been mentors and influences on our work and in our growth as parents.
If you like our show, please subscribe and stay tuned for more conscious parenting advice and insights. And check out our link tree at linktr.ee/yourkidsdon'tsuck to donate and connect with us.